Once upon a time, there was a curious young boy named Robert. Robert had always loved books. He would spend hours in his room, reading about distant lands, brave knights, and magical creatures. But there was something special about Robert. He had an unquenchable thirst for adventure, and every story he read seemed to fill him with the longing to explore the unknown. One rainy afternoon, as the sky darkened with clouds and the streets became quiet, Robert decided to visit an old bookshop that he had never noticed before. The shop was tucked away in a narrow alley, hidden between two tall buildings. The sign above the door read, "The Enchanted Bookshop," in faded golden letters. I remember pushing open the heavy wooden door, which creaked as if it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and leather bindings. Shelves upon shelves of books filled the room, from floor to ceiling, and there was hardly any space to walk. The shop was dimly lit by a few flickering candles, giving the place an eerie but intriguing atmosphere. As I wandered deeper into the shop, I noticed that the books were not organized like in a regular bookstore. There were no sections, no labels, just a labyrinth of books, each one unique and inviting in its own way. Some were bound in ancient leather, others in delicate silk, and some even seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I felt like I was in a dream, where the world around me was both familiar and strange at the same time. Suddenly, an old man appeared from behind a towering stack of books. He was short and hunched, with a long white beard and twinkling blue eyes. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a history book. He looked at me with a curious smile and asked, "Looking for something in particular, young man?" I hesitated for a moment. "I'm not sure," I replied. "I just love books, and I've never been in a shop like this before." The old man chuckled softly. "Ah, this is no ordinary bookshop, my boy. This place is full of magic and mystery. Every book here has a story to tell, but some stories are more than just words on a page." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but I was too fascinated to ask further. The old man turned and began to walk away, but before he disappeared behind another stack of books, he said, "Be careful, Robert. Not all books are meant to be read." I was surprised that he knew my name, but before I could ask how, he was gone. I stood there, alone among the towering shelves, feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. As I continued to explore, I came across a small, dusty corner of the shop where the light seemed to dim even more. There, on a pedestal, lay a large, ancient book. Its cover was dark and worn, and the title was written in a language I didn't recognize. The book seemed to pulse with a strange energy, drawing me closer. Without thinking, I reached out and opened the book. The pages were old and fragile, filled with strange symbols and illustrations that seemed to move when I looked at them. Suddenly, a bright light burst from the pages, and before I knew it, I was no longer in the bookshop. I found myself in a vast, enchanted forest. The trees were taller than any I had ever seen, their leaves shimmering with a golden light. The air was filled with the sound of distant music, and I could see strange creatures moving among the trees. It was like stepping into one of the fairy tales I had read so many times before. I was no longer in control of what was happening. It was as if the book had taken me into its own world. I wandered through the forest, trying to find my way back to the bookshop, but the path seemed to change with every step I took. The forest was alive, and it was playing tricks on me. As I walked, I met a talking fox who told me that I had entered the world of stories, a place where all the tales ever told come to life. "You are in the land of imagination," the fox explained. "Here, every story exists, and every book in the enchanted bookshop is a doorway to one of these worlds." "But how do I get back?" I asked, feeling a bit worried. The fox tilted its head and looked at me with bright, intelligent eyes. "There is only one way to leave this place. You must find the lost book, the one book that has been missing for centuries. It holds the key to all the stories, and without it, you will be trapped here forever." My heart sank. The idea of being trapped in this world was both thrilling and terrifying. But I knew I had no choice. I had to find the lost book. The fox offered to guide me through the forest, and together we set off on a journey filled with strange encounters and magical challenges. We passed through villages where the inhabitants were characters from ancient myths, crossed rivers where the water whispered secrets, and climbed mountains that seemed to reach the stars. Along the way, I met other travelers, heroes and villains, wizards and warriors, each one with their own story to tell. Some were helpful, offering advice and clues about the lost book, while others tried to lead me astray. I had to use all my wits and courage to stay on the right path. As we traveled, I began to understand more about the world I was in. The land of imagination was not just a place of stories, it was a living, breathing entity that fed on the creativity and dreams of those who entered it. The more I explored, the more I felt connected to this world, as if it was becoming a part of me. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of the lost book. I started to feel hopeless, wondering if I would ever find my way back home. But the fox remained optimistic, always reminding me that the answer was out there, waiting to be discovered. One evening, as we were resting by a campfire, the fox told me about an ancient library hidden deep within the mountains. The library is said to contain every book ever written, including the lost book, the fox said. But it is guarded by a fierce dragon who will only let those with a pure heart enter. The idea of facing a dragon was terrifying, but I knew I had to try. The next morning, we set off towards the mountains, determined to find the library. The journey was long and difficult. The mountains were steep and treacherous, and the air grew colder with every step we took. But I was driven by the hope that the lost book would be there, waiting for me. Finally, after many days of climbing, we reached the entrance to the ancient library. It was a massive stone structure, half buried in the mountainside, with towering pillars and intricate carvings covering its walls. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the lingering presence of magic. As we approached the entrance, I could feel the ground tremble beneath my feet. The dragon emerged from the shadows, its scales glinting in the dim light. It was a magnificent creature, both terrifying and beautiful, with eyes that seemed to see into my very soul. "Why have you come here?" the dragon's voice boomed, echoing through the mountains. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I seek the lost book," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need it to find my way back home." The dragon studied me for a long moment, its eyes narrowing. "The lost book is not something that can be found by just anyone," it said. "It requires a heart that is true and a mind that is open to all possibilities. Do you believe you are worthy?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure if I was worthy. But I knew I had to try. The dragon slowly stepped aside, revealing a large, ornate door behind it. "Enter, if you dare. But remember, the library tests all who seek its treasures. If you are not true in your intentions, you will never leave." With the fox by my side, I walked through the door and into the ancient library. The sight that greeted me was beyond anything I could have imagined. Rows upon rows of books stretched as far as the eye could see, their spines glowing with a soft, golden light. The library was silent, yet it felt alive, as if the books themselves were watching me. I wandered through the aisles, feeling both overwhelmed and awestruck by the sheer number of books. Each one seemed to whisper a different story, each more intriguing than the last. But I knew I had to stay focused. I had to find the lost book. As I searched, I realized that the library was not just a place of knowledge but also a place of trials. The books seemed to test me in different ways. Some tempted me with promises of power, others tried to lead me astray with false clues. But I remembered the dragon's warning and kept my mind clear and my heart true. Finally, after what felt like hours of searching, I found a small, unassuming book tucked away in a dark corner of the library. Its cover was plain, with no title or markings, but I felt a strange connection to it, as if it was calling out to me. I opened the book, and to my amazement, the pages were blank. But as I turned each page, words began to appear, forming a story that seemed to be written just for me. The story was about a young boy who entered a magical bookshop and was transported to a world of imagination, where he had to find a lost book to return home. It was my story. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. The lost book wasn't just any book, it was my book, my story, and I had been living it all along. The journey, the challenges, the encounters, they were all part of the tale that was unfolding in the pages before me. As I reached the final page, the words "the end" appeared, and a bright light enveloped me. When the light faded, I found myself back in the enchanted bookshop, standing in front of the old man with the twinkling blue eyes. "Well done, Robert," the old man said with a smile. "You found the lost book, and with it, you found your way back home." I was filled with a sense of accomplishment and relief. But there was also a part of me that was sad to leave the land of imagination behind. It had been a place of wonder and adventure, and I knew I would never forget it. The old man handed me the lost book, now bound in a beautiful cover with my name on it. "Keep it close, Robert," he said. "Your story is just beginning, and there are many more adventures to come." I thanked the old man and left the bookshop, stepping out into the bright sunlight. The rain had stopped, and the streets were filled with the sounds of the city once again. But I knew that I had changed, that the journey I had taken had made me stronger, braver, and more open to the endless possibilities of life. And so, with the lost book in my hand and a heart full of new dreams, I set off towards my next adventure, knowing that the magic of the enchanted bookshop would always be with me, wherever I went. The end.